What's up YouTube? Capital G here talking Yang Zing in this video and asking a question that I am sure many people are going to deem absurd, and that is, could it be just possibly that Yang Zings are tier 1 or at least close to tier 1 and maybe just the Yu-Gi-Oh community collectively just doesn't want to accept it? Because let's be real, Yang Zings were kind of the bastard child of the Duelist Alliance era. If you look at that pack, it gave us 4 archetypes. They were all tier 1 when they hit the ground running, and Yang Zings out of those 4 archetypes, they were kind of like the 4th place. Like, they weren't nearly as successful as Teller Knights or BA or Dolls, and they didn't see nearly as much play as the other decks, and a lot of people would say, including myself, that they were the worst out of the 4. And this deck it's been mildly successful this format. I think it's top 4 regionals now, but I guess more specifically when it comes to Dueling Network, he's currently 4th as I shoot this video, but if you've been watching my channel, you've seen that I've had a couple of duels with the guy, Duel commentaries. He's been 1st. He's had, like almost an 1800 rating with this deck, and this is spanned across multiple formats. He was playing this deck last format. Obviously, some of the cards in here were not available last format, but it's been an ongoing thing, and it leads me to believe, it leads me to ask the question, is it the deck or is it the player? Because it has to be one. And I'm sure that some people will try and discredit Dueling Network, like, being the top player doesn't mean you're good. Like, it's just Dueling Network. But there's really not that big of a difference between Dueling Network and playing at like a regional or something like that. When you get to, the top 20 ratings of Dueling Network, like, you get really high up there. I know that. I know because I've been the #1 player and ranked on Dueling Network. Ish95 he's done it with Cleefort before. I can't remember if it was with Cleefort or with another deck. But the point is, once you get really high up, you're not playing any troll decks. You're not playing against pretty much any rogue except, I guess this is considered rogue. But you're playing against strictly the meta. And even people like, I think his name is Dp-Ygo, the big German player who I believe he's won on YCS. Like, he plays on Dueling Network a lot too. And that's a lot of times how he tests. So Dueling Network is a pretty good judge of not only the meta, but of, potentially like a player's skill, because you don't really face those trolley decks when it's 2 out of 3 and your opponent has to go 1st and 2nd. Now, specifically to this deck, if those of you, some of you guys might not know how this deck operates at all. You might be like, why is he running Zephyr and Yang Zings? Well, Zephyr make the deck faster. To be honest, it's kind of how Yang Zings are still able to keep up. Like, that's how they've been able to keep up with the Joneses, is the fact that you can, mass pendulum summon a ton of these guys at one time, making your synchro plays a lot easier. The fact that this is kind of like the MVP, like a lot of the deck revolves around getting secret out immediately. The fact that when you pendulum secret, it's automatically going to net you a card. It gives you the potential, it gives you the option to be either aggressive or to get like a defensive card, because secret can either get you a copy of Oracle, it can get you a defensive lockdown card like Zephyr Divine Strike, which is essentially like an Infernity Barrier themed for Zephyr. It can get you something like Yang Zing Creation if you know that you're going to have to go for a grind game. And the fact that this deck can run multiple pendulums, Eccentric Archfiend, means that you don't have to really run MSC. You don't have to waste spots on that. You have a card that is effectively an MSC, but also serves as a pendulum scale in case you need the pendulum summon. So it's like, it's never a wasted card. Now, what Nye has done recently, this is like brand new to his Zephyr build, is he has added in the Odd Eyes cards. Well, he has 2 Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, which pretty much guarantees him that he's going to see this card, because this searches this. It can search Archfiend Eccentric. It can search out Treasure. So there are definitely targets here. And then Sky Iris. Now, Sky Iris is actually pretty brilliant in this deck. And if you've ever seen this deck in action, it's always been a deck that kind of like fundamentally revolves around the it revolves around the field spells a lot, which is why he's running 3 copies of Terraforming. It's always been big because of Oracle de Zephyr and because of Chicken Game just letting you draw cards. But now with Sky Iris, like, you have a way not only to search out your Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, but you can blow up your Yang Zings at the same time, which means you can get to whatever Yang Zing that you need, mainly this guy, because Jiaotu is kind of how you get all your plays going. So it's like the deck it's getting faster and even more consistent. And the thing about this deck is, usually if you're playing like Pendulum Magicians or if you're playing Pepe, their turn one boards aren't really that good. Like, assuming they're not playing Vanity's Emptiness or Solemn Warning, for the most part, maybe they'll just pendulum summon like 3 monsters, unless you're playing like Apex Avion, where you're like literally summoning Solemn Judgments. Like a lot of their fields are King of the Pharaoh Imps plus like some other random monster. They're not anything that a Regeki can't just rack, or that is so completely like imposing against the other player, except maybe like an Omega, because that's kind of a card that you can be used during your opponent's turn. This deck can do like some pretty damn like impressive lockdown fields, and some of that is again with Zephyr Divine Strike, and this is a searchable card, so don't be like, well, what if you don't draw it? It's searchable. You can just search it, and you'll pretty much always be able to activate it during your opponent's turn. But this deck routinely can go into Void Ogre Dragon. This deck can go into Herald of Perfection, which if you're playing a deck like New Lightsworn, you basically just lose. Or if you're playing like Infernoids or Cosmos or something like that, well, more so Infernoids, your opponent activates Reasoning. A lot of time this deck will end with like a Chi-Win and a Beyond, and you just be like, okay, well, I'm going to activate my effect. I'm going to synchro during your turn, and all of your stuff that would go to the graveyard, it's all banished. Plus, I'm going to negate the next thing that you do with my Herald of Perfection, and it can't be destroyed by battle, so don't, there's no sense in trying to run it over. You pretty much have to use an effect, and when you use an effect to threaten it, I'm obviously just going to negate said effect. You can go into Chow Fang, and this deck runs every single major attribute, so it can lock down anything like water, wind, light, dark. It can lock pretty much anything that isn't divine. So this could be a situation where it is just one player who's just way ahead of the game, and he knows how to play this deck exceptionally well, which I don't know, man. I mean, has there ever been a case outside of maybe Jeff Jones, and he played the Psychic deck, got second place at a YCS, and people tried it after him, realized the deck's really not that good, maybe it was just his day. Same thing with him getting he actually won a Shonen Jump with a Skill Drain dad deck, and then people kind of tried it. They were like, it's good, but it didn't really take off like some of the other decks. So it could just be that Nai is like a way ahead of the game, and he's constantly innovating when it comes to Yang Zing. Or it could just be that Yang Zing are just much better than what people think. They can play aggressive. This deck can actually technically OTK because of the the Speedroid synchros and whatnot. And again, the deck going first has a lot of lockdown. It can often end with like 7 cards. The deck is getting more consistent. You don't have to wait for it. It solves a lot of the problems that Yang Zing had in the past, where it's like, oh my god, we have to set a Yang Zing. If my opponent doesn't run it over, I have to Darkhold it or wait forever to summon in the backseat. It's like, nah, you just have Sky Iris, and you can just blow your shit up yourself and get whatever cards that you want. And another thing is Baxia. I've always believed that spinning monsters, or just spinning whatever your opponent throws at you, is infinitely better than like destroying or putting in their hand. And as long as Baxia can spin Pendulum Zones, then I think you're in pretty good shape. Now, if your opponent has a Sky Iris, then it's a little more difficult to try and go after their Pendulum Zones. But in general, I don't know, man. I feel like this deck I lean more towards it being the deck and not necessarily the player. I think a lot of it has to do with people still don't know what a lot of these cards do. So when they play against Yang Zing, it's kind of like, oh crap, it's Yang Zing. I expect them to play kind of slow, and then the deck goes first, and it drops like, a Herald and a Void Ogre Dragon and a Baxter, and you're like, oh crap, I wasn't, prepared for 3 big ass monsters plus a Infernity Barrier and, a whole bunch of negates. So I don't know. You guys let me know what you guys think. I just kind of want to touch on Yang Zing for a minute. Thank you guys for watching as always.